So I just finished watching the series finale of Arrow about 30 minutes ago, and here is my spoiler-filled thoughts on Season 8 and the finale. Let's talk about it. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. If you can relate, you're probably in the right place. Consider clicking that subscribe button. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Share your thoughts on the last season of Arrow as well as the finale of Arrow. This is a spoiler review, so feel free to spoil away down below in the comment section. Also, I created a companion video for this that I put over on my Patreon page where I talked about the whole series of Arrow, my experience watching it, what I loved, where things started to get frustrating for me, and how I felt that they kind of landed the ship. And so if you want my full kind of deeper thoughts on the show Arrow, it's about a 15-minute video that's over on my Patreon page. Join at any level and you can unlock that. With that said, I'm going to go into this, and this is intentionally just my gut feeling reaction coming out of the finale of the show Arrow. If you don't know this, I've been watching Arrow since episode 1. I was pumped to watch it even before the show had been announced because Green Arrow showed up on the show Smallville, and so I wanted to see that show. So this is something that I've been watching for 8 years, but I've been excited about for like 12 years or something like that whenever he showed up first on Smallville. Loved it at the beginning, and I've had quite a few frustrations, as many early Arrow fans have had throughout the latter half of the show, or the show after season 2, really. But I've stuck with it, and I went into season 8 extremely concerned, because season 7 was essentially the series finale. The show was about Oliver Queen returning to the city to save the city. Season 7 ends with him leaving the city, having saved the city, and going to retire and prep to go off to this crossover. And then season 8 is basically crossover season. And that has left me very frustrated with what they decided to do with this show that I dedicated 8 years to watching. And I'm not alone in this. Stephen Amell appeared on Michael Rosenbaum's podcast, Inside of You. Like, appeared on it. The episode debuted last week, about a week ago. And there was kind of two different sections to the interview with Stephen Amell, because it's interesting what goes down in this. And what he clearly says on both kind of halves of it is that this is almost a direct quote. I thought season 7 was the logical conclusion to the show, but with the amount that they offered me to do 10 more episodes, and this is a quote, it would have been fiscally irresponsible for me to say no. The star of the show, on a podcast before the finale aired, said, I thought season 7 was the logical conclusion to the show. And he did 10 more episodes because they offered him money. He said that. And I don't begrudge him he's an actor. That's his job. And if your job, they offer you to pay you a bunch of money, he's right. It would be irresponsible for him to do that. But it says something about what I felt about this season, which was, this doesn't make sense as the finale for this show. It doesn't make sense for this show because this isn't a sci-fi show. It's in a universe that has sci-fi around it, but all the time travel, universe hopping, rewriting universe stuff, that's like stuff from The Flash and Legends of Tomorrow. Same shared universe, but the show I signed up for to watch called Arrow is not that. And you can watch, the MCU does this, where each movie has its own kind of tone and the way they tend to do things, and then you jump into other ones and it gets wackier and stranger. They have different tones, though they're all in the universe. But with Arrow, for season 8, they took all the other stuff and they squished it into the show, because they'd already resolved the main plot line, which was Oliver trying to save his city. So suddenly, season 8 becomes the epilogue to the show that's just there for the crossover. And it's just for us to see how he's going to die. And that, to me, the word I've been having this conversation with people on Twitter this whole season, where they're like, didn't you really like last night's episode? It's like, I had no real issues with last night's episode. When I look at this season, it didn't have episodes that made me mad. There were a lot of episodes I enjoyed. But as the finale to the show, as a whole season of this type of thing, it was just kind of bizarre. And so what I've been saying on Twitter to people I've been talking with is that it feels kind of like I've been betrayed. Like they set up one show, and instead of giving me a proper conclusion to that show, the show I've been watching for 8 years got hijacked in order to give them the crossover event that they wanted, which is in particular frustrating because I think they made a really bad crossover, or a mostly really bad crossover that was so focused on the cameos that it lost line of the story. And I thought the second half did a better job of focusing the scripts better and having a clear through line. But I mean, the general vibe of it was like, this is kind of a mess. That they decided to write the script based off which cameo said they would do it. And so it just totally just felt like this muddled mess. And they sacrificed the show Arrow so that they could make this lackluster crossover event. That's really frustrating to me. So, the stuff where we're going back, seeing different timelines and kind of, doing, It's a Wonderful Life in certain sort of senses. Yeah, I could enjoy those episodes as just standalone things I was watching, but it just doesn't feel like it should be the end of the show. And then when you look at this season, the way it actually plays out, Oliver, as we know him, basically died about 6 weeks ago because he died in the first episode of the crossover, and then they brought him back, but it's not really him. So we've seen Stephen Amell, but Stephen Amell, as we know him, basically died about 6 weeks ago. And then, he's Spectre, and he's, revived version of him and gets death scenes and flashbacks. But he's been gone, but his show's still been on the air for 6 weeks. Right? Technically the way it's played out, 4 episodes of crossover and then these last 2 episodes. But it's just such a weird thing to do. And so we get out of the crossover event, or actually, he dies at the next to last one of the crossover, and then there's one more episode of the crossover, and then we come back and we do a backdoor pilot where they set up another show with the last 2 episodes of Green Arrow's show. They're setting up another one show. Like, what are you doing? Like, you literally hijacked one of 10 episodes for the closing out Oliver's arc to set up the next thing you want to do. Just a really weird thing to do. Doesn't put a great taste in my mouth. And then 2 weeks after he actually died, we get the funeral episode. This is a weird way to do it. It just feels like, I couldn't say I was excited for this finale because it was like, all the emotional momentum of Oliver's sacrifice, that was lost 2 weeks ago. We already did that. Then you told this other story over here, and now we're looping back to be like, let's honor Oliver by making an episode that's all about him, but that he's only in flashbacks. It's just I don't understand at all how they thought this was okay or would be honoring to the fans that have been around since episode 1. So frustrating. And then the cherry on the top of this terrible dessert was it ends in the afterlife. The last shot of the show Arrow is Felicity and Oliver in an office where he first met her, and it's the afterlife, I guess, and like, I've got forever to tell you the story. What? Of all the things you could do to end the show, of moments to end it on, that he sacrificed himself 2 weeks ago. We saw a backdoor pilot, and then we see him in the afterlife. It's like they totally lost their ways, what it felt like to me. That they forgot what the show was about and what initially drew people in. And they were so swept up in all the crossovers and big universe stuff and melodrama that they made so many choices. There's just nowhere good to end the show. Because you think the show that they started, it's real easy to have Oliver sacrifice himself once and for all so that like Team Arrow can continue on saving the day or something like that in the city. And that would feel like makes sense. Or you could see it retiring and do happy ending version of it. That could make sense. But the idea that it turns into a sci-fi show where he has a daughter that he doesn't get to see, but then we do an epilogue season where his daughter, grown up from the future, time travels back in time to stop a cosmic being from destroying the What? This is not the show I signed up for. And that's what you turn the show Arrow into. I get crossover events. We're going to do that. I get shared universe. But on the show Arrow, and I know a lot of you loved it. I know a lot of you really liked this season, but it's just not what I signed up for. I don't see myself rewatching these last number of seasons. Maybe the prison arc, but the show just totally lost its way for me, unfortunately. And that was very discouraging since I just loved the concept of it, loved the first couple of seasons. There's always little glimmers of hope inside of it. And then as Stephen Amell, Oliver Queen himself said, I felt like season 7 was the logical conclusion, which it was, had they actually designed that season to be the end of the show and not done these wacky flash forwards. They could have actually ended it properly. Or you can do a weird sci-fi epilogue season to set up a really bad crossover that's designed just to give a bunch of cameos and to bring Supergirl and Black Lightning into the same continuity as the other characters, at the cost of the show Arrow that I enjoy, or did enjoy. I didn't enjoy that sacrifice that they chose to make. So I'm frustrated. Just wanted to share my just emotional, immediate, rambling thoughts on all of this. Tell me what you thought down below in the comment section. Remember, if you want my full take on the show, where I talk more about the stuff I loved about it earlier on, and then talk a little bit about the stuff that frustrated me, that's over on Patreon. You can unlock it at any level. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies and TV too much.